in love with. Then everybody will be happy. My father's honor will be restored, the music shop in Billings will be repaid, and I can take a wife. I hope you are well. I miss you. The hotel room, even though it has every convenience, can be a lonely place. Your friend, Lewis. Lewis addressed an envelope to Sam, folded the letter, fitted the newspaper clipping in it, and found a 6-cent stamp on it in his money bag. He sealed the envelope, pasted the stamp on it, and dropped the letter in a mail chute outside the door of his room. Now I'll go to sleep, he thought. He went into the bathroom, used the toilet, then drew a tub full of cold water in the bathtub. He couldn't get Serena out of his mind. How wonderful it would be if only she were here. Before settling down for the night, he picked up his trumpet and played the song he had composed for her when he was in Ontario. Oh, ever in the greening spring, by bank and bough retiring, for love shall I be sorrowing, and swans of my desiring. He tried to play softly, but in a minute the phone rang in his room. Lewis lifted the receiver and put it to his ear. I'm sorry, sir, a voice said, but I'll have to ask you not to make so much noise. The Ritz does not allow its guests to play brass instruments in the bedrooms. Lewis hung up the phone and put his trumpet away. Then he turned out the lights, climbed into the tub, and curved his long neck around to the right, rested his head on his back, tucked his bill under his wing, and lay there, floating on the water, his head cradled softly in his feathers. Soon he was asleep, dreaming of little lakes in the north in the springtime, dreaming of Serena, his true love. Chapter 16. Philadelphia. Lewis worked all the last week of September for the Swan boatman in the Boston Public Garden. He was a great success and was becoming famous. On Saturday, the boatman paid him $100 in cash, which Lewis placed carefully in his money bag. The boatman, after paying the first night's bill at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, decided to let Lewis sleep on the lake instead of in the hotel, and this suited Lewis better. He slept with the ducks and the geese on the lake, and floating gracefully on the surface of the water, his head tucked under his wing. Lewis took good care of his trumpet. He kept it polished, and once a week he cleaned the spit out of it. He learned new songs whenever he could, by listening to people's radios and by attending concerts. He was very good at remembering music he had heard. He was really a natural-born musician, or in his case, a natural-hatched musician. One song he liked was Beautiful Dreamer, Wake Unto Me. Whenever he played it, he thought of Serena, and always when he finished it, the passengers on the Swan boat clapped loudly and cheered. Lewis liked applause. It made him feel light-hearted and gay. Sometimes at the end of the afternoon, Lewis played Now the Day is Over. He made it sound sweet and sad. One afternoon, when he was leading the last trip of the day, he played the Cradle Song by Brahms. The passengers sang the words, Lullaby and Good Night, with roses be light. A boy in the front seat of the boat pulled an air rifle from under his jacket and began shooting BB shots at Lewis's trumpet. Whenever a shot hit the horn, it made a pinging sound. So the Cradle Song sounded something like this. Lullaby, ping, and good night, ping, with roses bedight, bing. The children on the boat roared with laughter when they heard this, but the grown-up passengers were angry. One of them seized the boy's rifle. Another went home that night and wrote a letter to the Boston Globe urging a stronger gun control law. On some afternoons at the end of the day, people gathered on the shores of the lake and listened while Lewis played taps. It was a peaceful scene, a memorable hour. The Swan boat had never enjoyed such popularity or made such a lot of money for the owner. But Lewis knew that the boats would not run all winter. In a few days, the boats would have be hauled out for the season and wait quietly for the arrival of spring. One day, when Lewis was waiting for the boat to take its passengers aboard, a Western Union messenger boy appeared on a bicycle. "I have a telegram for a Swan," he said. The boatman seemed surprised, but he took the telegram and handed it to Lewis, who opened it promptly. It was from a man in Philadelphia. The message said, "Can offer you $500 a week for a nightclub spot. 10-week engagement. Please reply. Signed, Abe Lucky Lucas, Hotel Nemo." Well, that's $26,000 a week, but $500 a week for 10 weeks, that's $5,000. Wow. Lewis did some quick figuring. $500 a week for 10 weeks, that was $5,000. $5,000 would easily pay his father's debts to the music store. He took his slate and wrote, "Offer accepted. Arrive tomorrow. Meet me at Bird Lake in the zoo. Splashdown will be at 4:52 p.m. Hope this will be a convenient time for you." Lewis showed the message to the Western Union boy, who copied it on the telegraph ink. "Send it collect," wrote Lewis. The messenger nodded and rode away. Lewis stepped back into the water. The boat lines were cast off, and Lewis led the way. He knew it was his last appearance with the Swan boat, and he felt a little sad. It was a warm, quiet Sunday afternoon, the last Sunday in September. Lewis played all his favorite tunes. Lazy River, Beautiful Dreamer, Oh Ever in the Greening Spring, Now the Day is Over, and then, as the boat neared the dock, he raised his trumpet and blew taps. The last note echoed from the walls of the Ritz and lingered over the public garden. It was a sad farewell. For the people of Boston, it meant the end of summer. For the boatman, it meant the end of the best week of business he had ever had. For Lewis, it meant the end of another chapter in his adventurous life, out in the big world, trying to earn enough money to get his father and himself out of trouble. Lewis slept peacefully that night, being very careful that his money bag was safe. The next day he flew to Philadelphia to keep his appointment with Mr. Lucas, the man who had sent the telegram. Lewis had no trouble finding Philadelphia. Almost anybody can find Philadelphia who tries. Lewis simply rose into the air with all his things around his neck, and when he was about 1,000 feet high, he followed the railroad tracks to Providence, New London, New Haven, Bridgeport, Stanford, Cobb, Greenwich, Portchester, Rye, Mamaroneck, New Rochelle, Pelham, Mount Vernon, and the Bronx. When he saw the Empire State Building, he veered off to the right, crossed the Hudson River, and followed the railroad tracks to Newark and Trenton and Point South. At 4:30, he reached the Schuylkill River. Just beyond, he spied the Philadelphia Zoo. Bird Lake looked very attractive from the air. It was crowded with waterfowl of all kinds, ducks and geese mostly. Lewis thought he also saw 2 or 3 swans. He circled, picked an open spot, and at exactly 4:52 he splashed down. His trumpet banged against his slate knocked against his metal, his metal rapped against the chalk pencil, and his chalk pencil on its string wound itself around his money bag. All in all, the splashdown caused quite a commotion. The ducks and geese were not expecting anything like this to happen. A big white trumpeter swan, dropping down out of the sky loaded with personal possessions? Lewis paid no attention to the other birds. He had a date to keep. He saw a man leaning on a wide railing in front of the birdhouse. The man was dressed in a purple suit and wore a Tyrolean hat. His face looked shrewd and wise, as though he knew a great many things, many of them not worth knowing. That must be Abe Lucky Lucas, thought Lewis. He swam quickly over. "Go-ho," he said through his trumpet. "My pleasure," replied Mr. Lucas. "You are right on time. The splashdown was sensational. Welcome to the Philadelphia Zoo, which crawls with rare mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, and fishies, including sharks, rays, and other fish-like vertebrates. Watch out for wild animals. This place is replete with them. Snakes, zebras, monkeys, elephants, lions, tigers, wolves, foxes, bears, hippos, rhinos, woodchucks, skunks, hawks, and owls. I seldom come here. My work confines me to the throbbing heart of the city, among the money changers. I am under great pressure from my work. How was your trip from Boston?" "Smooth," wrote Lewis on his slate. "I made good time. What about my job?" "A happy question," replied Mr. Lucas. "The job will start on October 15th. The contract has been finalized. Your place of employment is a nightclub of great renown across the river, a place of high fashion and low prices, a jumpy joint. You will be called upon to make appearances each evening except Sunday and play your trumpet for the happy customers. Once in a while you can join a jazz group. Louis the Swan on Trumpet. The pay is very good. My spirits are lifted by thinking about the pay. Wealth and happiness are around the corner for Louis the Swan and Lucky Lucas, the great of heart. My agent fee is 10%, a mere bagatelle. How do I get to the nightclub? Asked Louis, who only understood about half of what Mr. Lucas was saying. In a taxicab, replied Mr. Lucas. Be at the north entrance of the zoo, Girard Avenue and 34th Street at 9 o'clock on the evening of October 15th, a night that will live in memory. A cab will await your pleasure and will transport you to the club. The driver is a friend of mine. He, too, is under pressure from his work. Who's going to pay for the cab? Asked Louis on his slate. I am, replied Mr. Lucas. Lucky Lucas, the generous of heart, pays for the cab for Louis the Swan. And by the way, I see that you are wearing a money bag and that it is plump with moolah. I suggest from the kindness of my great heart that you turn this money bag over to me for safekeeping during your stay in Philadelphia, a place of many thieves and pickpockets. No, thank you, wrote Louis. We'll keep money bag myself. Very well, said Mr. Lucas. And now there is one other matter I must bring to your attention. Most of the birds that swim on this luxury lagoon have undergone surgery. Candor compels me to tell you that the tip of one wing is usually removed by the management. A painless operation popular with zoos all over the world. Pinioned is the word for it. I believe it detains the water bird and prevents him from leaving the narrow confines of his public park and rising into the air, because when one wing is shorter than the other, the balance of the bird is upset. His attempt to take off would be crowned with failure. In short, he can't fly. Sensing and advice the revulsion you would feel towards having the tip of one of your powerful wings removed, I approached the man in charge of birds and laid before him a proposition. He has agreed not to clip your ring. It is arranged. He is a man of honor. Your freedom of movement is assured. You will not be pinioned. But in return for this so great favor on the part of the management of the Philadelphia Zoo, you are to give a free concert here at the lake every Sunday afternoon for the people of Philadelphia. The pheasantry who come here to refresh themselves. Is it a deal? Yes, wrote Louis. We'll give Sunday concert. Good, said Mr. Lucas. Farewell for the nuns. Be at the north entrance at 9, October 15th. A cab will await you. Play well, sweet Swan. You will be the finest thing that has happened to Philadelphia since the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Louis didn't understand this, but he nodded goodbye to Mr. Lucas and swam off towards the island in the center of the lake. There he stepped ashore.